Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Bloodline Naruto Neglected by Family Part 1 Naruto Harem. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. My life. Minato Namikaze was looking at his 3 children with pride. They were only 6 years old and they were strong for their age. The first child, Menma Namikaze, his youngest son, stood at 3 feet 5 with spiky red hair and deep purple eyes. Menma was a good kid. Well, sometimes. He's very overconfident, and can also cause a bit of trouble when it is unnecessary. The second child was Natsumi Namikaze. She was the youngest daughter. She was 3 feet 4, had long blonde hair and purple eyes that radiated happiness and mischievous. The oldest daughter, Mito Namikaze, was 3 feet 5 and possessed long red hair and blue eyes. She was the brains of the 3, being smarter than most her age. She was also more calm and collected than her hyperactive brother and sister. "Look, Two-san, we did it!" Natsumi yelled from the top of the tree she was standing on. Minato gave off a huge smile and went up to hug his kids. "I'm very proud of you," he yelled back. When his wife Kushina Namikaze, former Uzumaki, came out and saw her family in a group hug, she gave a radiant smile. "What's all the commotion about?" she said, and all 4 turned their heads to look at Kushina. Of course Natsumi was the one who broke the silence. "We finally got to the top of the tree," she yelled, while Menma and Mito nodded in agreement. "Yeah, we did. No one can measure to us now," Menma said with a fire burning in his eyes. Mito sighed at his overconfidence but was still happy nonetheless. Kushina gave a loud happy laugh and went to high-five her children. Now if anyone saw this moment, they would label it as the perfect family, the family everyone loves. Except one, that is, Naruto Namikaze, the oldest son of the Yondaime Hokage, sat in his room looking out his window to see the oh-so-happy family, if he could even call them that. Naruto himself was about 3 feet 6 with spiky blonde hair and deep blue eyes. He was ridiculously smart for his age, even beating a couple of the Naras in intelligence. Naruto gave out a sigh and walked away from his window and crawled into bed and thought about his life. Since he could remember, his parents had always forgotten about him. It wasn't bad at the start, but ever since he had turned 5 it started getting worse and worse. They now forgot about him when they set the table, cook dinner, and sometimes when they leave the house. But worst of all, he can still remember what happened when he asked his parents to train him. Flashback. A 5-year-old Naruto ran downstairs and went towards the backyard to see his parents training his siblings. Naruto frowned and ran over to his father. "Two-san, why can't I train with them?" he asked, and Minato jumped a little at his sudden son's appearance. "What the, Naruto?" Minato thought. Then after he registered what his son said, his eyes darkened a bit. "Sorry Naruto, but you will have to wait," he said, and Naruto this time got angry. "Well, why not? Why do they get to train but I don't?" he yelled, but was suddenly cut off by his mother. "How dare you raise your voice at us?" Kushina yelled, now getting Menma, Natsumi, and Mito's attention. After that, Kushina and Minato scolded Naruto and yelled at him, saying things that number 5-year-old should hear, and sent him to his room. Naruto bolted to his room, leaving his laughing siblings and his scowling parents. Naruto ran to his room and slammed the door shut with tears running down his face. Why, it's just not fair," he thought, and jumped in his bed and cried himself to sleep. End flashback. Naruto's POV. "I sighed as I remembered that day. My parents did apologize, but it was a apology, so it didn't mean jack shit. I didn't have any friends, and I could thank my siblings for that. Mainly Menma, because of his status as the Hokage's favorite son, and only in most people's minds, everybody played with him and didn't even try to know me. Did I forget to mention that Menma, Natsumi, and Mito each hold 3 tails of the Kyuubi's chakra? Well, because of that they are labeled heroes of the village. Add the fact that they are the Hokage's kids, and that will really boost your ego. So here I am, forgotten. The holder of the Kyuubi's soul, the most important part of it, and yet I am forgotten. Sometimes it seems like I have no presence at all. At times I just feel like a shadow. I've met the Kyuubi a few times and each time was pretty fun. After I broke down his tough wall of hatred and malice, he is an okay fuzzball. Don't tell him I said that though." I let out another sigh and closed my eyes. Our birthday was in 2 days and I wasn't looking forward to it. Just like I wasn't looking forward to last year's. Equals plus line break plus equals. Third person POV. Naruto opened his eyes and looked at the date and gave out a sigh. October 10th. Huh. Wonderful. he muttered as he got out of bed, quickly getting dressed into his black t-shirt and shorts and walking downstairs. He heard laughter and happiness, and he looked around only to see his family eating happily at the breakfast table. A pang of anger and jealousy rang through his heart as he saw them eating happily without him. So he scowled and started walking to the door. Mito stopped laughing and started eating until she saw her brother walk toward the door. She was shocked and a little mad at herself. How did she not notice her own brother wasn't eating with them? "Hey Oni-chan, where you going?" she said, getting everyone's attention, and they all looked to the door and saw their son about to leave the house. Menma and Natsumi looked confused while Minato and Kushina were looking on in shock. "He wasn't eating with us," they thought together. Naruto, who was a little surprised that someone stopped him, and he looked back and saw his family staring at him. "Out," he coldly replied, and before anyone can say anything he already left the house, not before muttering, "Happy birthday Menma, Mito, Natsumi." The Namikaze household was silent. Did no one notice Naruto wasn't there? They started eating again, but the happiness from early had gone. "Happy birthday Naruto." At secret training ground, Naruto sighed for the 100th time that day. Today was turning out to be terrible. He got some ramen from Ichiraku and left for the training grounds he had found last year. Naruto's sensitive ears picked up rustle in the bushes, and he looked and saw a boy and a girl. The first girl looked about 5 with semi-long white hair with the tips being a soft tint of blue. Her eyes were also blue and stood around 3 feet 2. The boy had black hair that was going down in between his eyes. He also looked like he was 5, and he had one black eye and one blue eye and was 3 feet 4 tall. Naruto and the two kids started at each other for a while. Until Naruto broke the silence. "Who are you guys?" he questioned, and the mysterious boy stood up and put his hand out for a handshake. "Hi, I'm Satoru Kaza. I'm 5 years old and I like thunderstorms," Satoru said. Naruto just looked at him with a curious gaze and nodded and shook his hand. Satoru let out a huge smile and looked over to the girl, and she rolled her eyes. "I'm Izumi Nitashi. I'm also 5 years old and I like the cold," she said in a frosty manner, trying to intimidate Naruto. She was slightly shocked when Naruto looked at her with a blank look and nodded at her. "Naruto Namikaze." The two kids nodded, confused. They had heard of the other Namikazes but never heard of him. "What are you doing here?" Naruto questioned again before they could speak, and Izumi and Satoru looked at each other and shrugged. "We were running away from the orphanage," Satoru said, while Naruto raised another eyebrow and looked over at Izumi, and she nodded that they were telling the truth. "Why?" Naruto wondered, and this time Izumi spoke up. "They don't treat us very well because we hurt other kids," Izumi said, and Naruto wanted to laugh but he saw that she was serious. "And how do you do that?" he asked, and Satoru blushed a bit whilst scratching the back of his head. "Well, you see, we kinda have a bloodline that we can't control," he said, embarrassed, with Izumi looking a bit embarrassed as well. Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Bloodlines? What are your bloodlines?" Naruto asked, and their faces brightened up a bit. Satoru bent down and touched his hand to the grass, and the grass started to shine a light blue, and lightning started to crackle around the grass. Izumi then walked over to a tree and touched it, and ice started to form around the tree until it was completely frozen. Naruto was now wide-eyed, staring at the two in awe. Satoru and Izumi looked a little smug, and Satoru lifted his arms up and a lightning bolt shot out towards Naruto. Izumi and Satoru looked on in fear of what just happened. Naruto stood frozen in place and lifted his arms up to try to brace himself against the shock and was too scared to open his eyes. After a few seconds, Naruto was still standing still with his arms up and feeling very confused. He slowly opened his eyes and saw a big pink structure in front of him, saving him from the attack. Izumi and Satoru ran over to Naruto and started apologizing frantically until they saw what Naruto was looking at, so they stared confused at it. "What is it?" Izumi asked, and Satoru shrugged. Naruto, however, didn't reply because he was deep in thought. Walking away from the two, Naruto headed towards a clearing. They both raised an eyebrow as Naruto put his hand out and started to channel chakra. Like before, though, a giant pink structure erupted from the earth. "Shoten," Naruto heard in his head, and Naruto became confused and started to think. Shoten, wasn't that a bloodline from Kiri? Naruto closed his eyes. "Shoten," he said, and Izumi and Satoru looked even more confused. "Shoten," they said, but Naruto just smiled a small smile. Later, Naruto was walking towards his home with a small smile on his face. He had made his first friends and found out about his Shoten. Izumi and Satoru had also agreed to meet him there every day so they could hang out. Reaching his home, he walked in with a grimace. He could hear the party had already started and they hadn't even noticed he was there. When Naruto entered the living room he saw all the clan heads and their children, Jiraiya of the Sennin, Tsunade Senju and a few civilians. They were all gathered around his siblings giving them happy birthdays and presents. Naruto let out yet another sigh and walked to his bedroom. It seemed like no one had noticed him, again. That is until Minato called a toast, hoping that his father had seen him and was going to wish him a happy birthday. Naruto turned around and listened. "Hello everyone, I want to thank you for coming for my kid's birthday," he said and got claps from the partygoers, "and I'm very happy to announce that I am now naming my son Menma Namikaze as the new Namikaze clan head." He yelled, getting cheers and claps all around. Naruto stood frozen in place. He lost his birthright, the only thing he had was now gone. Enraged, Naruto let out high amount of killer intent, effectively getting the attention of some of the partygoers, stormed to his room and slammed the door. The people who saw Naruto were shocked. Did they forget he was here? Where was he today anyway? Some however didn't even know who that kid was. Menma, Mito and Natsumi didn't realize it as they were still getting congratulated and given more presents. This though shocked Minato and Kushina. They didn't even notice that he wasn't here when they decided to start the party. Of course they felt bad about taking the clan head away from Naruto, but couldn't he see Menma deserved the spot as clan head more than Naruto did? So they let it pass. Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Kakashi on the other hand were staring at Naruto with wide eyes. They totally forgot about him. They never sensed his chakra and he had no presence. Naruto was in his room with tears flowing down his cheeks and started to cry softly while punching his wall. "It's not fair. They get everything, I get nothing. I didn't even get a present this year," Naruto thought sadly as he fell asleep on his bed with tears still in his eyes. Deep within him the Kyuubi no Kitsune gave out his own deep sigh whilst his container was asleep. He watched Naruto's life. Naruto was scolded, and ignored by everyone except a select few. The Kyuubi had never felt so disgusted at the human race more in his life. He knew they could be monsters, but he didn't think they would be to just a young child. He was also amazed that Naruto held no fear when he first visited him in his mindscape. He simply asked why he attacked the village and made small talk. Naruto was the first one to bother breaking down the Kyuubi's hatred and malice wall and actually know him. He had made the Kyuubi feel like he had a purpose. The Kyuubi gave out another tired sigh and laid his head on his paws and closed his eyes to sleep. Genin exams. 6 years later, Naruto woke up with a searing headache. God, Satoru-kun hits hard. Naruto thought and looked at his clock. It showed 7 a.m. I slept a little later than usual, he thought as he got dressed in his black t-shirt with a red zipped-up jacket over black Anbu-style pants and to top it off a red crystal necklace around his neck. Naruto walked out of his room and entered the living room and saw his parents, quickly ignoring them, and tried to leave without them noticing him. However, his parents saw him and Kushina quickly spoke up, "Hey Naru-chan. Want to eat with us? I'm about to make breakfast." She never finished her sentence as Naruto muttered "no," and slammed the door shut. Kushina let out a sigh and turned back to her husband, who had a grimace on his face. "Minato-kun, we have been trying to get Naru-chan back in the family but, she began crying at the end of the sentence. Minato gave her a reassuring hug. "It's okay Kushi-chan, we'll get him back, don't you worry," he said mournfully, staring at the door his son left out of with a sad look on his face. "We'll get you back, Naruto." With Naruto didn't spare his parents a glance as he left the house. He was still pissed off what had happened a few days ago. Flashback. Naruto had climbed down the stairs and saw his family having a family meeting. Menma looked at Naruto with a scowl while Mito and Natsumi looked at him with happy expressions and excited smiles. Minato and Kushina smiled at him as well and motioned Naruto to sit down. Naruto looked at them with emotionless eyes and leaned against the wall. Seeing as Naruto wasn't going to sit, Minato broke the silence. "Well, I'm happy to say that all 3 of you are all graduating in a few weeks," he said, and his kids beamed with pride while Naruto just looked on blankly. Minato, seeing as this was going downhill, already turned to his oldest. "Naruto, your mother and I thought it would be a good idea to start training you with your siblings," he said joyfully as the rest of the family smiled at him while Menma scowled and looked away. Naruto though just looked down and clenched his fists, his hair overshadowed his eyes. After a few moments of silence he looked up and was met with his smiling family, minus Menma, and they were shocked to see his eyes and expression flash from anger back to his emotionless face. Why, he said and threw his family a loop. What you mean Naru-chan? Kushina asked, slightly shocked at her son's reaction. I asked why you are starting to train me now. You never cared years ago, why are you caring now? He said, his voice getting darker and angrier by each word said. The rest of his family then stood there in shock. Even Menma was taken aback by his answer. Naruto looked at his family's shocked faces hatefully, and worst of all, he thought, they couldn't think of an answer to my question. Naruto scowled and turned on his heel at the same time and walked towards the door. I am not training with you. I've been doing fine on my own for years. I can do it longer if I have to, he snarled, slamming the door shut and leaving a sad and shocked family behind. Kushina ran to her room and slammed the door, only managing to make it a couple of meters before she collapsed and started crying. Minato dismissed his children and went to go comfort his wife. He walked in and what he saw made his heart break. His wife was lying sobbing on the floor. She looked broken. Minato walked over to her and pulled her into a hug and she cried into his chest. Minato-kun, why? I know what we did was wrong, but... She was about to finish when Minato cut her off. Kushina-chan, all we can do is wait for him to forgive us. What we did was stupid and dumb, but he will forgive us. Well, hopefully, he added in his thoughts. End flashback. He scowled at that memory. After years of neglect, they think training will fix their relationship. He walked to the academy and saw all the kids that wanted to be ninjas. He looked at them with an emotionless face. But they never saw him anyway, so it didn't matter. He walked into the classroom and took his seat in the back of the class. He was about 45 minutes early, so he put his head down and started napping. He was just glad that graduation was today so he could stop coming here. He woke up 20 minutes later by a tap on his shoulder. He looked up to see his siblings in all but blood, Satoru Kaza and Izumi Nitashi. They smiled down at Naruto and he returned the smile. After a few minutes the class went silent as the Prince of Konoha and the Princesses of Konoha entered the classroom. When the girls saw Menma they started blushing and giggling to each other. He now stood at about 5 feet 6 with spiky red hair and a deep shade of purple eyes. He was dressed in a long black trench coat, with a light blue shirt, black Anbu pants and black ninja sandals. The guys were looking at Natsumi and Mito with lust and were drooling. Natsumi was dressed in a blue top that shows the beginning of her stomach and showing off her growing bust, long black tight shorts that go down to her knees. Long black ninja sandals with black socks. She stood around 5 feet 4. Mito was wearing a strapless black battle dress, a sword strapped to her back around her waist. She had shorts underneath her dress with black stockings going up to her thighs and black ninja sandals. They went to their seats and class finally began with Iruka and Mizuki calling roll. After roll, Iruka had a speech about how proud he was of all of us, and blah blah blah. After his speech they went outside to test their accuracy test. Although you needed a 6/10 to pass, most of the civilians scored a 4/10 on the kunai and shuriken test, the best being a pink-haired civilian by the name of Sakura Haruno who got a 5/10. The clan head's children, having being trained, scored around a 6/10 and 7/10. Menma, Natsumi, and Mito both scored 10 out of 10, getting cheers from the whole class and their respective fan groups. The last two were Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Namikaze. Sasuke walked up and also scored 10 out of 10. Sasuke strode smugly past the people, who failed, ignoring the cheers from his fangirls, and looked at Naruto's emotionless face and gave him a smirk. Beat that dead last, he said, getting snickers from a few of the kids. Satoru and Izumi glared at him, but Naruto shook his head in a negative motion and walked up to the starting area. Okay, you need a 6/10 to pass, good luck. Iruka said, and Naruto nodded and picked up his kunai and shuriken and threw them all at the same time. Well, you got a 6/10, that's a passing grade, Iruka said as he watched Naruto with a critical eye. He was holding back a lot. He seems much stronger than he lets on. I might need to inform the Hokage of this. Naruto walked back and ignored the slightly disappointed looks from his sisters and the smug look on his brother's face. Naruto sat down in his spot near the back and sent a few hand signs to Izumi and Satoru. They nodded. The hidden message exchange wasn't missed by Mito, and she raised an eyebrow, although she pushed it to the back of her head for later. After the accuracy test was over, they went back inside to start on their written exam. The written test went by fast as it was only an hour long. Naruto only getting a 61, 1 mark above the score needed to pass. Since the written test was over, Iruka and Mizuki now started the last part of the tests. The jutsu test, This was to see if they knew the Academy 3, which consisted of the Henge no Jutsu, Kawarimi no Jutsu, and Bunshin no Jutsu. One by one people went in and out of the examination room, some with a forehead protector on, while some exited without one. Naruto namikaze, Iruka called, and Naruto got up and went to get this over with. As he walked down the rows of desks he heard the occasional whispers. Hey, isn't he the Hokage's son? Tisuke Hokage's son, a dead last. What a joke. Ha, Dobi will probably fail. Naruto ignored them as usual and walked into the room where Iruka was in with a line of new Konoha forehead protectors sitting on his desk. Okay Naruto, you know the drill, Iruka said, and Naruto nodded and proceeded to do the Academy 3. He did them without the use of hand seals, which shocked Iruka. Well, congrats Naruto. Iruka sighed, so he was hiding his power, I was right. Naruto grabbed a leaf headband and walked out. As he walked out he was met with shock from many of the students. He ignored them again and walked outside, where saw his family waiting for him. Aniki, yelled Natsumi before she glomped him, holding Naruto tightly, and started talking on how she was happy he passed and whatnot. After he managed to get out of Natsumi's hold he looked at his family and tried to sneak away, until Minato stopped him. Wait Naruto, we were going to get some ramen as celebration, would you like to come? He said hopefully, while Kushina, Natsumi and Mito gained hopeful expressions. Menma just scowled at him. If the baka doesn't want to come, that don't make him, he said coldly, while his sisters frowned at him and Kushina turned and glared at Menma. Menma, that isn't very nice, apologize to your brother. Kushina trailed off as she saw that Naruto was nowhere to be seen. Minato let out a sigh and put his arm around a now sad Kushina. It's okay, maybe next time, he said, and they started walking until Mito spoke up. Hey, I need to stay after for a bit, I want to ask Iruka-sensei something, she said, and her family raised an eyebrow but nodded anyway. Okay, be safe, she heard her mother say, and she ran off in the direction Naruto left in. She needed to know what he was up to. Naruto walked peacefully to his secret training ground. No doubt Izumi was getting annoyed at Satoru's complaining about me not being there yet. He let out a chuckle at that. He made it to his training ground, and like he thought he saw Satoru complaining to a now pissed off Izumi. Naruto let out a cough and got their attention. Sorry I was late, my family held me back, Naruto said, and they nodded, and out of nowhere ice shards were thrown at him, and before they could hit him a giant blue crystal erupted from the ground and stopped the shards, a surprise attack. You need to do better than that, Izumi-chan, he taunted while she scowled. He let out a chuckle and he realized that Satoru was gone. Until a big blue lightning bolt came from the forest and again a crystal blocked it, but this time the crystal was a bright green. He did a few hand signs and touched his hand to the ground. Crystal release, arena trap, he said, and seconds later a pouting Satoru and a struggling Izumi were dragged out of the forest. Oh, did I mention that Satoru was trapped in a pink crystalline structure? No fair, Naruto, Satoru whined, to which Naruto let out a chuckle and snapped his fingers, making the crystals disappear, allowing Satoru to fall on top of Izumi. Naruto watched in amusement as Izumi started yelling at Satoru for perverted antics when Naruto picked up a faint chakra signature. He grabbed a kunai from his pouch and threw it into the bush, but all he heard was a yelp and a thud. Naruto gathered his courage and rushed the bush to confront the intruder, quickly throwing them to Izumi, who had stopped fighting with Satoru and caught said person. Naruto walked over to the person and his eyes opened in slight shock. Mito. The now dubbed Mito looked at Naruto with awe and was slightly scared that she was caught spying on him. Hi Aniki, she said shyly, and Naruto just stared at her for a few moments until he finally broke the silence. Why are you here? He glared, and Mito started to sweat a little under her brother's gaze. Well, I saw you communicating with your friends earlier and I guess I was just curious, that's all, she explained, and Naruto nodded. How much did you see just now? He asked with more of an edge to his voice. Mito brightened up and looked at her brother with a happy smile. That was so cool, Aniki. How did you do any of that? And why haven't you told To-san and Ka-san? Naruto's eyes darkened slightly before regaining his blank look as he made eye contact with his sister again. I never told Hokage-sama or Kushina-sama about this because they don't need to know. And from what I see, you don't need to know either, he said with another glare, making Mito sweat under his gaze. But, Aniki, you seem strong, and I know you were holding back in the academy since day one. I guess I just wanted to see how strong you are, she confesses, and instead of the sympathy she had hoped from her Aniki, she got just the opposite. Naruto's eyes darkened more and snarled. Once again, this isn't any of your business. Mito now started to feel a little scared under her brother's gaze. She never knew was so cold. And it scared her. He was so different from Menma. Menma was a happy child. Well, besides being smug and full of himself, although he has a reason to be, he was strong. He was stronger than both her and Natsumi. But Naruto was so different. He was cold and quiet. Never spoke unless spoken to. Also respectful. Basically the opposite of what Menma is. How different are her brothers. Then she tries to think of Naruto when he was younger. She couldn't think of a single moment with him when they ate dinner together after he was 6 years old. And that alone worried her. She then looked up and was met with the dark stare of her brother. "Leave," he said, "and don't tell anyone of what you saw today." He said, and she nodded out of fear and ran the other direction. As she was running away, Satoru came up to Naruto and put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't you think you were a little mean?" he asked, and Naruto turned around and glared at him, but there was less malice in it. "They have ignored me for years and you expect me to be nice to them?" he ridiculed, and Satoru slumped a bit. "Good point." Izumi sighed and walked over to Naruto and slapped him over the head. "Baka, you could have at least tried to be nice," she said, and Naruto rubbed the back his head. "You know I don't care anymore," he said, and she sighed and turned and started to walk away. "Whatever. Naruto-kun, Satoru-kun, I'll see you tomorrow," she said, and when she left, Satoru looked at Naruto and they fist bumped and left as well. Naruto gave a sigh and fell on his back and looked at the sky. "I don't know why, but I feel like something bad is going to happen," he muttered, and he grabbed the red crystal around his neck and looked at it. "But what I do know is that I will see you again soon, Harem." Inspector Me, Hokage's office. Minato sighed and ran his hand through his hair and leaned back into his chair. "Seems like you're troubled," said a familiar voice, and Minato turned around and was met with his sensei casually leaning on the window. "Jiraiya-sensei. What are you doing here?" Jiraiya climbed through the window and stood in front of Minato's desk. "Minato, I found some vital information." Minato raised an eyebrow at that but stayed quiet and motioned Jiraiya to continue. "The organization Akatsuki are planning to make their move in 3 years," he said, and Minato tensed and looked at Jiraiya on shock. "Are you sure?" he asked, and Jiraiya nodded. "I wouldn't tell you if it weren't true," Jiraiya said, and Minato nodded reluctantly and leaned back into his chair. "Minato, you know what this means, right? You have to up the kids' training," he said, and Minato seemed to freeze at that, and a look of guilt overcome Minato, making Jiraiya get a little nervous. "Jiraiya-sensei, remember that prophecy you told me and Kushina a few years back?" Minato said, and Jiraiya raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Yes, I do. Thou with a great burden shall become strong to take on a god, or weak enough to fall in any battle." "I remember it very well. Why?" Jiraiya asked, and Minato looked down and let out a single tear. "I think we were wrong," Minato said barely above a whisper, making Jiraiya more worried and shocked. "Wrong? What do you mean, Minato?" he asked, and Minato looked down even further. "Because of this prophecy we focused our attention on Menma, Mito, and Natsumi, and decided we would train Naruto after we finished with the other kids' training." He paused and looked at Jiraiya and saw him nod and continued. "Because of this we pushed him away. Jiraiya, after his 6th birthday, me and Kushina forgot about his total existence." He screamed and slammed his fists on his desk, making Jiraiya wide-eyed. "It wasn't until a few weeks before graduation that I finally saw his academy papers and it clicked. I had another son. Why did this happen?" he said, making tears falling from his eyes. Jiraiya stood there in shock with his eyes wide. He didn't know what to say to his student. This was partially his fault for telling them the prophecy. He looked at Minato's broken figure and gave a sigh and put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. After Minato had calmed down enough, he sat upright in his chair with his eyes red and puffy, and Jiraiya was above him with a hand on his shoulder. Jiraiya was about to speak when there was a knock on the door. Minato sighed again and Jiraiya squeezed his shoulder. "Come in," he said hoarsely, and the door opened to see a person he really didn't want to see right now. "Danzo," Minato and Jiraiya growled out. Danzo walked in and smiled, not a friendly smile but more an "I know more than you" smile. "I have some interesting news, Minato," he said, and Minato narrowed his eyes at the man. "And pray tell what this news is," Minato said sarcastically. Danzo just smiled and reached into his robe and pulled out a file and threw it on the Hokage's desk. "Just read and find out," the War Hawk said. Minato opened the file and Jiraiya peeked over to see what it was, and as they were reading their eyes were getting wider and wider. "This can't be true," Minato said, and Danzo's smirk only got wider. "Believe it, Minato, it seems your son is hiding a great deal." With Mito. Running. That's all Mito Namikaze knew at this point. She had escaped the woods where she found her brother and was now running for her life. She never felt so much fear in her life. She knows what she saw. Her brother had a bloodline that was associated with crystals. She had to do more looking into it, but now all she could think of was her Aniki. She still remembers the look her gave her when she found out. The look that could kill. That he would actually kill her if he found out that she had told people. And it seemed like he actually would do it. Mito found her house and bolted through the door, completely ignoring her mother and running into her room. She heard her mother call her but ignored it and rushed to her books and looked through the history of shinobi bloodlines. She looked through the book and found what she was looking for. Shoten, she whispered, unaware that she and Minato said it in the same time. With Minato. Minato looked up from the file and stated at Danzo with disbelief, that can't be true. Naruto hasn't shown any indication of having the crystal release. He said, and Danzo smirked. You say it like you know a lot about your son Minato. He said, making Minato freeze in his tracks. Then he got angry. You have no right to question those sort of things, Danzo. He said, and Danzo's smirk only got wider. Well, I'm just saying what I see, Hokage-sama. He said, and Minato's anger was rising more and more. They were both riled up to the point where neither noticed Jiraiya sneak the file into his pouch. Danzo, I think you should leave. Minato said angrily, and Danzo just smirked but nodded anyway and turned towards the door and walked out, not before saying, might want to have a talk with your son Minato. Before someone tries to take him. He said, and slammed the door shut. Minato sighed and fell back onto his chair and put a hand over his eyes. Well kid, I'm off, I need to get on my research. Jiraiya replied happily with a perverted smile on his face. Minato nodded and Jiraiya left through the window. Minato looked at the door where Danzo left and narrowed his eyes. How did Danzo know about that? His route should be disbanded. I need to look more into him. Minato thought, but then a pang ran through his heart. Does Naruto not trust me to tell me if he had a bloodline? He thought sadly. With Mito. Mito, after reading up on the fame crystal release, she couldn't believe it. Her brother had that, but if she tells anyone then he would K. She shuddered and pushed that into the back of her mind for now. While she was scared, she needed to get to the bottom of this. She heard a knock at her door. She put her book away and whispered a small, "Come in," and Menma opened her door. "Ka-san sent me to see if you were all right." Menma said, and Mito gave him a small smile and nodded, "Yes, I'm fine." She was about to walk out when Menma stopped her. "What happened when you were out?" Ka-san said, "You looked pretty freaked out." He asked, actually concerned. Mito looked at her younger brother and couldn't help but think of how Naruto and Menma were different. Naruto was silent and supposedly weak in every way. Never bragged, never got in trouble at school. Cold and distant. Then there's Menma, a family lover, loud and obnoxious at times. Very strong and always was the perfect kid in school. Very arrogant but has a reason to be. Mito shook her thoughts out of her mind and looked at her brother. "I'm fine, Menma, need don't worry." Menma stared at her for a while but nodded and they left her room. Kushina rushed towards her and asked what's wrong while Natsumi was asleep on the couch. And drooling a bit. Gross. Menma kept eyeing Mito. He knew something important happened. It made an impact on her, as she didn't talk as much as she used to. If he had to guess, it was with Naruto. He clenched his fist and growled when he thought of his brother. His weak older brother. He gave a small smirk when he remembered he became clan head. He remembered seeing his brother's angry-filled gaze. He needs to become strong. His world will be different. Full of strong people, and he would become the strongest shinobi ever. "Fool, still letting your fears cloud you," an ominous voice said, and Menma stood rooted to his spot. "What?" he said out loud, and his mother and sister looked at him. Mito and Kushina looked at each other and back at Menma, who was frozen in place. "What's wrong, Menma-kun?" his mother asked, and Menma turns his attention to his mother and gave a smile. "Nothing, I'm just tired, I'll be going to bed," he said quickly and ran to his room. After he made it to his room, he started breathing heavily and put a hand on his head. "Who are you?" he whispered. The voice has been more and more frequent lately, saying the same thing every time. "What do you want from me?" Menma had his own problems to deal with. Naruto looked around the academy, looking at the talking kids who are now ninjas. He will never understand how half these kids even made it this far. The academy was far too simple. He looked at a pink-haired girl and blonde-haired girl who were talking happily about who were cuter, Menma or Sasuke. He remembered their names since he didn't care. He gave a small smile as they called the teams. He knew that Kiba, Hinata, and Shino would become a tracking team since their bloodlines excelled in that area. Also, the next generation of the Inoshika Cho trio was sure to be recreated with each of the clan heads' kids on the team. He knew Sasuke was going to be getting Kakashi Hatake as a sensei since he was the only one left with a Sharingan in the whole village. And he was paired with the pink-haired girl Sakama, Sakura, that was it, and a suspicious boy named Sai. And he predicted the three saviors of Konoha were on a team together, with their own mother as a gave off another smile as he looked to his left and saw his new team. Satoru was asleep while drooling on his desk, and Izumi was meditating. He was just happy that his calculations were correct. If he scored slightly above passing while his friends were in the middle of the class, there would have no choice but to put them together. It was a happy medium. The senseis he also guessed. Kurenai Yuhi was given the tracker tram, also known as Team 8, since she specifically asked for Hinata on her team. Asuma Sarutobi, the new sensei of Team 10, was given the Inoshika Cho trio, and Kushina Namikaze was giving Team 7 with her children minus Naruto. Team 11 was giving Kakashi Hatake, the only reason being that the village needed the Uchiha to become strong and live long enough to repopulate the Uchiha clan. And finally the new Team 12, consisting of Naruto Namikaze, Izumi Nidashi, and Satoru Kaza. And their sensei was Yamato. Naruto had done some research on this Yamato character and found out he was an experiment of Orochimaru and held the fable would release. One by one each team's senseis walked in and took respective teams. When Kushina walked through the door, it all went silent. She was dressed in her full ninja gear and people were in awe of the Hokage's wife. She smiled and looked at Naruto with a face of longing, but he completely ignored it. She was still upset that she couldn't get him on her team. She would definitely be yelling at her husband tonight. She cheerfully greeted her team and they all nodded happily. Sneaking another glance at Naruto, she left. Finally, after almost all the other teams had gone, a man with short brown hair wearing the standard Konoha Chunin flak jacket strolled in. Team 12, meet me at training ground 19 inches, he said while vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Naruto nodded and picked up Satoru by the collar and dragged him out, with Izumi following right behind them. As they made their way to training ground 19, they saw their sensei sitting on the ground. Sitting down on the ground across from, they waited for him to speak. After a few moments of silence he spoke. Hello, this is the new Team 12. We should probably get to know each other. My name is Yamato, I like training and forests. My hobbies are training with Kakashi Senpai and reading, and my dream is to become an Anbu captain. The now dubbed Yamato said while looking at the only girl of the group. Ladies first, he said while Izumi rolled her eyes. My name is Izumi Nidashi. I like the cold and snow. My hobbies are training with Naruto and Satoru. I like snow and popsicles. I hate rapists, child beaters, and overall hot weather. My dream is to become the strongest kunoichi. She finished and Yamato gave a nod and smile and turned towards to the over-bubbly one that couldn't contain his excitement. My name is Satoru Kaza. My likes are thunderstorms, eating seafood, and fast-moving stuff. I hate what Izumi hates. My hobbies are training with Izumi and Naruto. He finished with a goofy smile, making Yamato sweat drop, but he recovered in time to nod and look to the last member. My name is Naruto. I like training with my friends, and my little Harem. I hate what they hate, and my hobbies are none of your business. He finished, getting Yamato to frown a bit from the lack of info but nod anyway. Okay, so I am supposed to test you on your skills, he said while fishing on his pouch and pulled out 2 silver bells. The goal is to take these bells from me before the time runs out. And if you fail to get one, you will be sent back to the academy. He finished and clipped the bells to his belt and was about to start when he heard something that made his eyes wide. We quit. He snapped his head towards his students and started wide-eyed. Did he just hear him right? What? He asked, and Naruto spoke. We're a team, we fight as one and we will leave no one behind, he said, and Satoru continued. We will not fight each other, we are one. And Izumi finished. If we all must fail, then it should be as a team instead of abandoning one of us. They finished and Yamato was shocked. These kids passed the test instantly. And they already seemed like a team. He got over his shock and looked at his students with pride. Well, you pass. We will start training and missions tomorrow, meet back here at 6 a.m. sharp, he said and vanished in a swirl of leaves. After he left, Saturn let out a yelp of victory. Yes, we're a team. You're so smart, Naruto, he said, and Izumi was also smiling big. Come on, Naruto, let's get something to eat, she said and grabbed his wrist and started to drag him to the Dango restaurant. Naruto gave a sigh at his friend's antics, but when he saw their smiling faces he couldn't help but smile. This was his true family. And he would do anything to protect them. Time skip. This. Izumi muttered as they made their way to the Hokage's office for hopefully a better mission. They were sick and tired of these chores called D-ranked missions. When they made it into the Hokage's office they were met with a frantic Hokage. Yamato stepped up. "What's the problem, Hokage-sama?" The blonde Hokage looked up and was met with the sight of Team 12. Suddenly getting an idea, the Hokage straightened up and spoke in an official tone. "Team 12, I have a B-rank mission for you." Making them all go wide-eyed and stand to attention. A few days ago Team 11, consisting of Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Sai with their sensei Kakashi Hatake, was given a C-ranked escort mission in Wave Country. But it seems they have met some trouble, he said, and pulled out a scroll and wrote some things down and handed it to Yamato. They have encountered the Demon Brothers, 2 high C-class missing nins from Kiri, and have asked for backup. Do you accept this mission? The Hokage asked, and the team all nodded. Hi. The Hokage smiled. Good, you leave in a few hours. Yamato, there is more information in the scroll for you. Dismissed. But Naruto, would you please stay for a bit? He asked, and Izumi and Satoru sent a concerned glance at Naruto. He signaled back to them that he would be fine, and they left, though reluctantly. After the door closed, Naruto turned and was met with the concerned and slightly scared face of the Hokage. Is there something you need, Hokage-sama? He asked with no emotion, and Minato mentally flinched at his tone. Naruto. I just wanted to say be careful out there. The Hokage said barely above a whisper. Naruto was faltered slightly but composed himself and gave a nod. I will, Hokage-sama, he said, and opened the door and was about to leave when Minato started talking again. Naruto, you know you could tell me anything, right? Any secrets, or if you need any help, right? He asked, and Naruto narrowed his eyes slightly. He knows something. Naruto thought and was silent before he started talking. I don't know, Hokage-sama, secrets or secrets. I'm sure you have some. Naruto said, and Minato deflated a bit but gave a nod and gave a small smile. Just don't forget, Naruto. No matter what, I am proud to call you my son, and I will always. He never finished as the door slammed and Naruto left the room. Love you. He finished as he let out a small sigh and went back to finish his endless piles of paperwork outside the Hokage's office. Naruto was rushing towards the village gates. With glassy eyes. No, I'm just being stupid. He definitely wasn't going to say what I think he was going to say. He thought as he refused to cry. He hasn't cried since he was 6. And he wasn't starting now. Minato walked home from a busy day of work with a smile on his face. He got all the new genin teams fixed and was glad with his choice. He decided to have a walk since it was such a beautiful day. He finally got to his house and unlocked the door. He smiled at his house. Nothing could ruin this day. Minato. His eyes went wide as he turned around and was met with his wife's piercing glare. He gave her a fearful look and started talking. Hey there, Kushina-chan, is everything alright? He asked, scared and concerned. He saw Kushina's hair split into 9 long strands, reminding him of the Kyuubi. What's wrong? What's wrong? I asked for Naru-chan to be put in my team, and guess what? He wasn't. She yelled while Minato eyes grew wide again. Kushin. I couldn't put him on your team. Me and the council already agreed, and it was the best choice. He yelled frantically while Kushina's glare only intensified. That's it, Minato Namikaze, no more, period. She said, and Minato's face grew from worry to shock. What? Kushina place. He tried to say but was met with a frying pan to the face. No buts, mister. You will listen to me. She yelled again, and Minato shot her a fearful look and nodded. Kushina nodded and turned around to the kitchen and grabbed a pink apron and threw it at him. Now get cooking, the food isn't going to cook itself. She said, ordered, and Minato nodded and went to go cook dinner. Kushina gave a happy smile and sat on the couch to watch TV. She was in control. Naruto made it to the gates and saw his team waiting for him. He quickly made his way over to them and was met with concerned gazes from his teammates and a smile from the ever-happy Yamato. Okay, now we are all here. Next stop, Wave Country, he said happily, and they made their way out of the gates. With Minato. Minato have a sigh as he thought of his son. He needed to tell him about his apparent bloodline. He signaled for all the Anbu to leave the room. As they left, he called in his sensei Jiraiya of the Sennin. A few moments later Jiraiya came in. Minato. I was doing research that needed to be due. Jiraiya, stop, this is serious. Minato said, stopping Jiraiya in tracks, and he turned serious. What is it, Minato? Minato placed down a silencing seal that covered the room and looked at Jiraiya seriously. I have a mission for you, he said, making Jiraiya tense up and nod. I'm giving you an S-rank mission. This mission is of the most importance. I need you to spy on the one Danzo Shimura and report on anything you find. Surprised, Jiraiya looked questioningly at Minato. Minato, why should I do this? He asked, and Minato gave a sigh. Danzo is planning something and I want to know what. I might just be paranoid, but I want you to watch him. Ever since he told me about Naruto, everything has. He stopped suddenly as a sharp pain ran through his body and he fell to the floor. Minato. Jiraiya yelled while Minato held his head in pain while tears were starting to fall. The P pain, sorry N. He ground out before he finally passed out from the pain. Jiraiya was looking down at Minato with concern and shock. What did Naruto have to do with this? Then it clicked. Minato said something about not remembering Naruto since his 6th birthday. He needed to talk to the Toads, but now he needed to get Minato to the hospital. Unknown to both but elsewhere, Kushina was having the same problem. With Kushina and the kids. Her 3 kids hurried Kushina into the hospital. What happened? Natsumi yelled frantically with a terrified look on her face while Mito and Menma also looked shocked and scared. I don't know, but that was freaky. Mito said and Menma nodded. It was his fault. Menma went wide-eyed as he heard the voice again. Whose? He whispered so that his sisters couldn't hear him. Your brother Naruto. It said again, and this time Menma lowered his head so his hair shadowed his eyes. Are you sure? He whispered again, and this time his sisters heard him and turned towards him. What? Natsumi said. He ignored her and just listened to the voice. Of course, who else would it be? He's been causing pain since he was born. The voice growled again and Menma's eyes turned into steel and looked up and was met with the concerned faces of his sisters. It was Naruto's fault. He said, and the girls widened their eyes. Natsumi scowled. Baka, what does Naru have to do with any of this? She yelled and Menma turned towards her and glared, making her stop. Think about it. Every time he's over, Ka-san ends up crying. Tu-san always has to comfort her for something Naruto did. He's been causing problems even when he's not here. He yelled, making Natsumi and Mito go wide-eyed. You hear it and don't lie. He's always cold and causes pain. He makes our parents sad, and the teachers never liked him. And our parents don't realize it. He yelled, punching the wall with sheer anger and the same hate showing in his eyes, as he looked at the startled Natsumi and Mito. If you don't see it, then you're lost like the rest of them. He said harshly, turned and walked out. The hospital room was quiet. Neither of the 2 sisters dared to speak and the only sound was the wind blowing in from the window. Natsumi turned to her sister and saw she held the same look on her face. Confusion. Mito walked out of the hospital in deep thought while Natsumi stayed back and stared off into space. Natsumi slowly walked over to her mother's room to check if she was all right. When she got there and saw she was fine and left the hospital, she was walking past pedestrians. They waved and bowed to her. If it was any other day she would return the gestures, but today had been different. Menma's words kept replaying in her head about Naruto. She loved Naru. She always thought of him as the cool, mysterious older brother that was super cool and strong. But when she really tried to think of him, all she could remember is when he was getting in trouble for something he never did, or how he never smiled after his 6th birthday. Her thoughts started going back to when they were at the academy. He was always quiet and respectful and never talked back. He was much the opposite of the rest of the kids. But still Menma's words kept replaying in her head. Was he true? Did Menma hate Naruto? But how could Naruto cause so much pain to their parents? She tried to get all her thoughts together, but when she couldn't, she let out a frustrated sigh. This is so frustrating. She said and made her way to a training ground. She really needed to blow off some steam. Menma also was making his way towards a training ground. When he arrived, he leant on a tree and took some deep breaths. What happened? Why did I blow up like that? He asked himself, and again, but like before there was no answer. Enraged, he punched the tree. Come on, tell me. Silence. Menma gave a yell of frustration and punched the tree again. Who are you anyway? He whispered to himself as sat on the floor with his back to the tree. What do you want? He said again, and his eyes started to feel heavy and he slowly closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. He never heard the deep chuckle. It's okay Menma-kun, you'll find out soon enough. All you have to do is destroy the chosen one. With Naruto. Naruto was walking down the road to Wave Country with his team when he felt a shudder go down his spine. But this wasn't a normal shudder, it felt more dark, and it certainly wasn't about this mission. He got the feeling things were going to be different when he got home. a lot different. Unknown area. A dark figure jumped from the ceiling and walked through the dark hallway. Danzo-sama, Naruto Namikaze just got a mission out of the village. The figure said. Danzo partially walked out from the shadows with only his cane and good eye showing, and gave a smirk. Interesting. Danzo said and turned around and his one eye flashed black for a second. Let's see how this turns out, shall we? With Naruto. Naruto gave a shudder. What's wrong with me? I'm not nervous, right? He thought, and he looked over and saw his teammates. They had now entered Wave Country and were looking for Tazuna's house, which was the location that Kakashi had told the Hokage when asking for backup. After a few moments of asking around, they finally reached Tazuna's house. When they got to the door, Yamato knocked and waited for a few seconds until they heard shuffling from the inside and the door swinging wide open. A beautiful raven-haired woman stood inside and looked at the ninja with slight fear until she caught sight of their Konoha headbands. Hello there, my name is Yamato, Junin of Konohagakure, and we were sent from our Hokage to help Kakashi-senpai's team. He said reassuringly. Is he here? The girl nodded and led them in. When she caught sight of Naruto, she gave a little blush but smiled at them all. My name is Tsunami. My father is Tazuna, who is currently out working on the bridge with the other kids guarding him, she said, and motioned for Yamato to follow her upstairs where Kakashi was resting. Yamato followed her and ordered his students to stay downstairs. No one noticed Naruto making a crystal clone and it following behind Yamato. Satoru made himself home by jumping on the couch and falling asleep instantly. Izumi sighed and sat on the opposite couch and entered a meditating position. Naruto walked over and exited the house and went to the roof. He got to the roof and saw a child sitting by a lake looking very depressed. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the kid and contemplated if he should go over or not. He gave a sigh and decided to stay where he was. He shut his eyes and lay down on the ground. A few minutes later he opened his eyes wide as a rush of memories hit him from his clone. Interesting, he said quietly, slowly getting up and making his way through the forest to the city. I want to finish this quick. With Yamato. Yamato looked at Kakashi with a mixture of awe and shock. You survived and beat Zabuza Momochi. And your genin are all okay? Yamato said while looking down at the tired and beat Kakashi lying in his bed. Kakashi gave a faint nod. Yes, we found out that Zabuza was working for Gato and was hired to kill Tazuna. My genin are with Tazuna at the bridge now, Kakashi said tiredly and looked over at Yamato. Sai has got information that Gato is working somewhere in the town. I wanted to go and do some scouting and figure out where he is, but I can't at the moment. Kakashi said, I would like you to train all the genin while I'm out, if that okay? He asked, and Yamato nodded. Of course, Kakashi-senpai, he said, and Kakashi gave his famous eye smile. Neither noticed the crumble of crystals from outside the door. Hours later, Satoru and Izumi were in the same position when Kakashi's team returned from the bridge with Tazuna following behind them. When Kakashi's team found the other genin, they were very surprised, or mad in Sasuke's case. What are you doing here? Sasuke asked, ordered while looking right at Izumi. Said girl opened one eye and when she realized who it was gave off a sigh and pointed upstairs, and right then Yamato came down. Oh good, we're all here. Wait, where's Naruto? Yamato said, making Sasuke and Sakura scowl while Sai looked, well, like Sai. Izumi opened her eyes and looked around at the same time as Satoru woke up. I think he's in the kitchen, Satoru said while rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. Just then, Naruto walked out eating an apple. I'm here. Remember, that's not the real him. Izumi and Satoru gave a smile while the other genin glared, except Sai, who was doing his fake smile. Why are you here, loser? Sasuke said, and Sakura of course started backing him up. Yeah, why are you here? We don't need a baka like you here. Sasuke can do this mission on his own, she yelled, making everyone cringe. Naruto looked at her with those emotionless eyes, spooking her out a bit. Hokage-sama's orders, he replied coldly, and with that everyone went quiet, until Yamato brought up the mission roles. Okay, since we're all here, we will discuss what we are supposed to do. He started off. My name is Yamato, I'm a Junin and I'll be in charge until Kakashi-senpai is up and running again. I spoke with him while you were still at the bridge and I'll be training you genin to stand up for any threat. We have organized a schedule for you, he said while putting a piece of paper on the table. A cough broke the silence and they all looked up and saw Tazuna looking embarrassed, angry and confused. I would like to know who you people are, he asked, and Yamato was going to answer until Tsunami spoke. They are other ninja that Kakashi-san asked for, they're here for extra protection, she said, coming out of the kitchen. Tazuna looked at the new Junin and Genin sizing them up, and when he was satisfied he turned and walked away. Well, as long as I get my super protection I'm fine with whatever, he said, getting a sigh from Tsunami and a smile from Yamato. Okay kids, look over the schedule and memorize it. We will start tomorrow at dawn. They all nodded and went their separate ways. Naruto grabbed a hold of Izumi and Satoru and whispered something into their ears, causing them to look at him in shock. Are you sure? Satoru asked. Naruto only gave a nod and walked outside to pretend he was relaxing. Satoru looked over at Izumi in worry. You think he'll be fine? I don't like how he has to do everything by himself, he finished, almost whispering, as his voice got softer and softer as he spoke. Izumi gave a sigh and squeezed his shoulder. He'll be fine, don't worry Satoru, she said, and they went back to remember the schedule. With Naruto, a scream started but was cut short with a kunai lodged in their throat. The dead body fell over lifeless while Naruto continued on his path deeper into the woods, surprised no one heard him. He said to himself while looking at the dead body. He was quite loud. He sighed deeply. He never liked killing, but it was one of Gato's thugs. Of course this wasn't his first kill. But that's a story for a different day. He was just happy he got the information he needed. The thug was easy to break, a few death threats and a cut here and there, and boom, all the info was spilled. Naruto followed his path and finally made it to his destination. He saw a pretty big building on the outskirts of town hidden by the natural forests. There were guards on each side of the building. He used his chakra to walk up the tree so he could get a height advantage and looked and saw even more guards than before. Well, time to storm the castle. Or Gato's base in this case. With the Konoha shinobi, Yamato was looking at the genin, with emotions of shock and disbelief. He turned his attention to Izumi and Satoru, who were currently at the top of the tree. He thought it would be smart to teach them tree walking. How did you guys? We've known since we were 10. Izumi cut him off and Yamato nodded dumbly and looked back towards the other genin. Naruto was currently asleep, Sasuke was glaring at Satoru with a heated gaze, and Sakura was drooling at Sasuke. Only Sai was actually trying to complete the exercise. He gave a sigh and let them finish while he woke up Naruto and made him to the exercise. This is going to be a long day, Yamato thought. With Naruto surveyed the building with narrowed eyes, trying to figure out the best course of action. There were 2 guards for every side. He looked up and soon saw that the sun was setting. He gave a small smirk and jumped from the tree and landed behind a bush. He did some hand signs and 2 crystal clones appeared. He motioned for one to seek around the back and the other to stay. The clone nodded and did what it needed to do. Once behind the guards, the clone looked back and mouthed, "Do I kill them?" The real Naruto gave a nod and motioned for the clone to continue. The clone gave a nod and the real Naruto closed his eyes. A few seconds later he turned to his other clone. "I need you to shield yourself and look if there is another entrance." Clone number 2 gave a nod and went off. The real Naruto felt a rush of memories from his first clone and closed his eyes solemnly. There was 6. "Rest in peace," he whispered quietly. Once the guards were down it was easier to get closer to the building. The second clone popped. With it came the memories of 2 more dead guards in a back door. He made his way around and picked the lock on the door and snuck his way in. When he got in, the smell of alcohol and invaded his sense of smell, and he heard screaming. He narrowed his eyes and looked to his right and saw 3 men holding a girl down to the ground. He got a little closer so he could hear. "Stay down, you bitch." One man yelled and smacked the girl across the face, making her yelp and fall over. The same man got on top of her and ripped off her shirt, ignoring her cries. "It'll be over soon, sweetheart, don't worry," another thug said, and he and his buddy started unbuttoning their pants. "I'll be fast for you," the other one said with a lustful look. Naruto's eyes narrowed in anger, unconsciously creating 3 kunais with his crystal release. Leaping out from the shadows he threw one at the thug on top of the woman, making him fall over dead. The other thugs turned around and one was about to yell until a kunai was found at his throat. The third thug looked around and was met with a kunai in his knees and fell to the ground. "Aw, what the?" he yelled, and the woman finally opened her eyes and what she saw shocked her. She saw a kid no older than 13 save her life and kill 2 people. She saw him move over to the downed thug and picked him up by the collar. The thug was about to yell at the kid, but when he looked at the kid's eyes he froze. They looked so dead for someone so young, but you could see a hint of anger in them. Naruto turned his eyes from the thug to the downed girl and back to the thug. "What were you going to do to this girl?" he said, and what shocked the women was at how his voice calmed her immensely. The thug sneered at the kid, "Shut up boy, what I do is none of your business." He yelled and spat in Naruto's face. He was surprised, and so was the women, when Naruto seemed unaffected. Naruto took one hand and wiped the spit of his face. After he wiped it off, he formed a crystal kunai and pointed it at the now terrified thug. "I'll ask again," he said, and leaned in closer to his ear and the kunai to his neck, effectively drawing blood. "What were you going to do?" he questioned. His voice still held the same emotionless tone, but you could hear an edge of steel. The thug tried to resist, but Naruto tightened his grip. "Were you going to rape her?" Naruto questioned again, still scarily calm while pressing the kunai closer, and the man nodded, scared. Naruto swiped the kunai, efficiently slitting the thug's throat and ending his life. "I hate rapists," he said fiercely with anger in his eyes. He turned towards the women and his eyes softened. He made his way over to her and bent on one knee. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, and all previous tension left the girl's body. She nodded dumbly, and Naruto made 2 crystal clones and one picked her up bridal style, making her blush a bit. "I'm taking you to a safe place, the boss has an important mission," the clone said, and the girl finally got a good look at her savior. Hot, she thought, and again blushed, and finally caught sight of his Konoha headband. "He's a ninja," she started at him for a few seconds until she finally spoke. "My name is Maria, thanks for saving me," she said gratefully, and the clone gave her a nod. "Naruto," was all he said, and they left the building. The real Naruto gave a sigh. He had wasted time in there. Gato might have been alerted by now. But at least he did something good. He made his way down the corridor stealthier, now that the guards might be on alert. He came by a room surrounded by 3 guards. It was the first guarded room he had come across, so he knew that this room must be important. He made more kunai and threw them into the guards' skulls, killing them instantly. He moved the bodies and opened the door slowly, and what he saw, his eyes widened. Thousands, no millions of gold bars were stacked around the room, with boxes filled with ryo and priceless artifacts where the gold was not everywhere. And this only had 3 guards, he thought, and walked in. He had an idea and took out his scrolls and started filling them with all the money and the artifacts easily sold or used that he could. After he had enough, he looked around and caught sight of a golden and brown scroll. He raised an eyebrow and bent down and took the scroll in his hands. He tried to open, but it seemed sealed shut. He narrowed his eyes in thought and packed the scroll away. He was just left the room. When he opened the door, he heard a scream, a male scream. He silently ran down the halls and turned and saw a very short-looking man holding his arm in pain and a girl in front of him. He looked farther and widened his eyes. "Zabuza Momochi," he thought, "you stupid bitch." Naruto heard him yell and turned toward the commotion and saw Zabuza sit up and grab the man's hand. "Listen, Gato," he said, making Naruto narrow his eyes. "We are working for you, you are paying us, and we will leave if anything happens," Zabuza said, and the newly dubbed Gato got up furious. "You will stop working for me. I am your income. I can do anything because of how rich I am. I can have anyone and anyone I choose with my wealth. So don't you say you can do anything." He yelled, but was silenced by a kunai being lodged in his throat. He, along with Zabuza and the mystery girl, widened their eyes in shock. Well, that was easy. They heard, and Gato's body fell over lifeless, and they turned their heads and saw Naruto standing with a bloody kunai. The girl got in a protective stance in front of Zabuza and formed needles out of ice, making Naruto go wide-eyed. "I don't know who you are, but I won't let you near Zabuza-sama," she yelled, and Zabuza grunted and looked at the kid. He couldn't believe a kid just killed Gato. Damn it, he needed money. "Haku, stand down," he said, shocking the now dubbed Haku. What he said, "Listen kid, I want to know who you are before I kill you," he yelled, and Naruto raised an eyebrow and looked at Zabuza. "He was terrorizing the town. I needed to put a stop to it, since no one else was," he said, shocking Zabuza and Haku. "Who are you, kid?" he asked, and Naruto turned around and walked off. "Naruto." Haku turned to Zabuza and he gave a nod, and Haku threw the needles at top speed, hoping to impale him. They were both stunned when 3 pink needles intercepted her ice needles in midair. They saw Naruto stop and turn around, and his eyes flashed in eagerness and excitement. He looked at the 2 shocked faces and made eye contact with Haku. "I've never had a fight with the fabled ice release," he said, and he started shaking. "I wonder if it's better than crystals." The wind picked up. He got into an offensive position while pink, blue and red shards of crystal started to circle around him. After a while he turned to Haku with a smirk. "We should find out, shouldn't we?" he asked, speeding through hand seals. "Crystal style. Crystal barrage." Satoru and Izumi were trying very hard to hide their smiles at seeing Sasuke fail over and over again on the tree walking. After Sasuke had fallen off the tree 3 more times, Satoru lost it. Ha ha ha, oh god, you're so bad, Sasuke. He yelled while laughing hysterically, and Sakura jumped up from the ground. No one messes with her, Sasuke-kun. Shut up, Baka. Sasuke-kun could beat you anytime. She yelled with a smirk, thinking she won. She wasn't expected for even more laughs to come out of him. Izumi finally had enough and hit Satoru behind the head. Shut up, let them practice, she said, and Satoru pouted but nodded anyway. Yamato, who just came down to check on them, gave a sweat drop. This isn't going well, he said to himself, and he looked at the genin and realized something or someone was missing. He walked over to the genin and asked, "Where is Naruto?" He asked. Luckily he was looking at the brooding Sasuke, so he didn't see Izumi and Satoru flinch. He went into the forest a little while ago, Izumi said, and Yamato nodded with and turned and walked out. I fixed Kakashi-senpai, so he should be up and ready soon, he said, getting happy nods from Team 7. Hours went by and Kakashi was finally able to stand up and walk around freely. But what scared Team 11 was that there was no sign of Naruto. Kakashi, having realized that one student was missing, he asked where he was. He got that he was away, and Kakashi nodded, accepting the answer. Another hour went by and they were all happily eating dinner, except for Tsunami's little kid whose name was Inari. Inari had been glaring at them since they came to wave to help protect Tazuna. A knock on the door startled them all out of their thoughts, and Tsunami went to answer it. Naruto, she yelled, as she wasn't expecting him, or two of him and a girl. The rest of the Konoha ninja went to see if he was fine, but they weren't expecting what they saw. Naruto, why is there two of you? And who is the girl? Yamato asked, and Kakashi's eyes went wide. Naruto. He thought in shock, not expecting his sensei's son was here. Naruto ignored them and walked inside. He gently lay the now sleeping girl on the couch and turned with his clone and looked at Konoha Shinobi and the Wave family. After a few minutes of silence, Tazuna spoke awkwardly. Who is she? And where did you find her? He asked as Tsunami went to get a first aid kit. Naruto have a sigh. I found her about to get raped by some thugs, he said, shocking everyone at him. Calmly he said it, and Kakashi spoke first. Well, good job, Naruto, he said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Can you bring the thugs you knocked out so we can interrogate them? They could be as part of Gado's army, he said, with Yamato nodding in agreement, and were superseded when Naruto shook his head. I can't bring them to you. There was an awkward silence until Sakura spoke. Well, why not? She asked grumpily, and Naruto turned towards her. Because I killed them, he said, and everyone's eyes widened in shock and horror. They were about to start asking questions until he raised his hand to stop them. That's not important right now, he said. I do, however, need help, he said. Satoru and Izumi eyes widened as they knew what was coming next. Naruto, are you sure? Izumi asked, making all eyes turn towards her and the Junin senseis to raise their eyebrows. Naruto nodded and gave her a soft smile. Of course, Izumi, he responded. When his other clone popped, he received the remainder of the information. As Yamato-sensei and Kakashi-san can see, I am a clone of Naruto, he said, making the Junin nod and the genin surprised. What I need is you guys to follow me. But I need people here to protect Tazuna-san's family just in case, he said, and Yamato spoke first. Naruto, I don't know what happened, but you can't order us around. You need to tell us the circumstances or I'm inside Gado's base, Naruto said, and all of their eyes went wide in shock and fear. Naruto, what were you thinking? Yamato yelled, and Naruto didn't look fazed, he just looked at him. Things needed to be done and no one was doing anything. I needed to change that, he said, and went outside. I want Team 7 to stay here while my team comes with me, he said, and Sasuke scowled and went to grab him by the back collar. I want to go, I need to get stronger. So I'm going, Sasuke yelled, and before he could grab the collar, Naruto grabbed his wrist and slammed the wall. Listen here, Sasuke. Don't let emotions cloud your judgment, that's not what being a ninja is, he said, and leaned in to whisper. I bet Itachi never does that, he said, and Sasuke went wide-eyed, and Naruto let him go and continued out the door. Come on, with Naruto. Crystal style. Crystal barrage, Naruto yelled while sending hundreds of pink shards at Haku. Haku went wide-eyed and formed her famous ice mirror and grabbed Zabuza and went away. Naruto scowled and looked around for the girl until he felt the temperature drop. He turned around and was met with icicles coming at him from the ground. He jumped and dodged them all, and when he caught sight of Haku he smiled. Crystal style, emerald chain. He yelled and a giant green crystal flew from his hand at lightning speed trying to impale Haku. She widened her eyes in shock but managed to get away with her mirrors. She jumped from her spot avoiding another chain and went through hand signs, ice style, ice dragon. She yelled as a giant ice dragon formed behind her and it launched at Naruto. He widened his eyes and forms hand seals, crystal style, ruby in case. He said and a giant red crystal formed around him shielding him from the dragon. Haku widened her eyes. How is your bloodline so advanced? She said in shock as the ruby structure finally broke down, freeing Naruto. It seems you're not holding back anymore. He said and he looked up and smiled a dark smile. From this point on, no more holding back. I need to see how strong you are. He smirked in satisfaction and went through complicated set of seals. Sapphire Art, Dragon Enlightenment. With Konoha team, the clone was leading his team and Kakashi through the woods to Gato's base. It was pretty awkward as no one said anything until Yamato spoke. How did you find it? He asked and the clone answered without turning around. I overheard a conversion and interrogated a few thugs. He said making them nod, and the silence returned. Finally they made it to a larger than average building. Here it is, Naruto said and they Konoha ninja nodded and he led them to the back where he had snuck in earlier. Not well guarded, Izumi said making them all nod. When they entered even the Naruto clone was surprised to see an army of thugs and missing nin scattered around the room in utter chaos. The Naruto clone whispered and Yamato nodded while Izumi and Satoru showed some fear. But it was more shocking when they heard a very familiar voice. The clone's eyes went wide and popped into crystals making Yamato jump in surprise and wider his eyes until he heard Naruto's voice yell. Sapphire Art, Dragon Enlightenment. Suddenly a giant blue crystallized dragon blasted through the wall taking down thugs as it made its way through the room until it smashed Haku against the opposite wall. Haku landed on her feet but looked up in fear as she heard footsteps. Naruto entered through the broken wall. Now I hope you're not done. He said while cracking his fingers and giving a dark smile, I'm just starting to have fun. He turned and saw his clone and team and widened his eyes when he saw his sensei. He tuned back to the thugs and gave a smirk. Yamato sensei, I want you, Izumi and Satoru to take care of these thugs. Is that okay? He asked and Izumi and Satoru nodded and Yamato nodded after hesitation. Naruto realized something and gave another dark smirk. Yamato sensei, Zabuza is somewhere here, can you find him? He said and Haku's eyes widened in fear and Yamato gave a nod and went off. He didn't know why he was following Naruto's orders but it just felt right so he quickly made his way out to find Zabuza. Satoru charged his lightning chakra into his feet so he could run faster and started cutting down thugs. Lightning style, thunder wave. He said and let out a burst of electricity electrocuted everyone in the vicinity while Izumi jumped from behind him, frost style, snowstorm. She yelled and snow started to come out of her collar and sleeves until a smile storm formed taking out all who were paralyzed from the lighting. Satoru gave a happy smile while Izumi sighed in relief. There's more, Izumi, be ready. He said and Izumi gave a smirk and nodded. Hi. On the other side Haku finally managed to her feet and look at Naruto with anger. I'm going to kill you for Zabuza-sama. She yelled and went through hand seals. Secret jutsu. Demonic ice mirrors. She yelled and encased Naruto in a dome of ice. Naruto didn't attack but just looked around for an exit until an ice senbon lodged itself into his shoulder. He gave a grunt and turned around but he saw she wasn't there. He scowled again when another senbon embedded itself into his shoulder. He looked around and finally saw her, in every mirror. No one has escaped this jutsu alive. She said, her voice getting darker and she gave a dark smile. And you won't be the first to escape. At Tazuna's house, Kakashi eyed the woman Naruto had brought in earlier with interest. She had barely spoken when Naruto was here, but now that he had left she was just sleeping. He looked over and saw his team and they all looked mad. Kakashi sighed. He didn't like how a genin basically bossed him and his team around, but Yamato seemed to have enough trust in him and seemed to agree with Naruto. He looked at Sasuke and saw him in deep thought. He raised an eyebrow. It was weird to see the Uchiha in a state other than brooding. Sasuke closed his eyes and thought about Naruto's words. He always saw Naruto as the weak one. He had lower than average grades in the academy, and never showed any real skill. But every time you looked at him, especially his eyes, it's like you were looking at a whole different person. Gone was the talentless Dobi, in place was a veteran ninja who has seen bloodshed. Sasuke looked at the ceiling and gave a sigh. His words were up his head harder than he might admit. He needed a lot more time to think. After a few minutes of silence a soft groan was heard and they looked over to see the woman was waking up. Kakashi got up after some difficulty and made his way over to the girl. The girl finally opened her eyes and was met with the one eye of Kakashi staring back at her. So she did the most logical answer she came up with. She screamed. Ah! She screamed, catching Kakashi and the rest of the house off guard while Tsunami and Tazuna came running in. What happened? Tazuna asked, and the girl looked up and realized they were also Konoha shinobi and her body relaxed a little. Who are you people? She asked carefully, not wanting to meet an end like what happened earlier to the thugs in Gato's base. Kakashi, after the ringing in his ear stopped, explained. My name is Kakashi Hatake Junin of Konohagakure no Sato, and this is my team Sai, Sakura Haruno, and Sasuke Uchiha. He said, and she widened her eyes slightly at the name, but no one noticed. You were brought into Tazuna-san's by one of genin by the name of N. Naruto. Kakashi was slightly surprised. Yes, Naruto is the one who brought you here, he said, and there was an awkward silence until Kakashi broke it. So what is your name, miss? He asked with his famous eye smile, and she started at him and after a few seconds answered, Maria. She said simply, and Kakashi gained a sweat drop but nodded anyway. Well, Maria-san, can to explain what happened earlier? He asked again, and this time she kept silent for good. Kakashi gained another sweat drop, and although he was still smiling, you could see the frustration on his face. I will only answer to Naruto, she finally said, and Kakashi gave a sigh. Fine, he said after a few moments, he'll be back soon. Sasuke eyes the girl with interest. Was there anything special about her? But gave up a few seconds later. He didn't know why, but she felt familiar for some reason. He just couldn't put his finger on it. With Team 11, lighting style, electric terrain. Satoru yelled, punching the ground, causing an electric shock to run through the floor, electrocuting everyone in the vicinity. The thugs screamed in pain, but it wasn't over. Izumi jumped from behind the wall and did a few seals, frost style, blizzard. She yelled, taking a deep breath and exhaling shards of ice and snow, which cut down all the thugs who were immobile. That's what I'm talking about, Satoru yelled, eyeing all the dead thugs. He looked over at Izumi and gave her a thumbs up and a smile. She returned it until her eyes widened. Satoru, behind you, she yelled, but before he could react he was thrown across the room. And a dark chuckle rang through the hall. Puny children, thinking you're all badass because you took down a few thugs. A dark but very feminine voice rang through, and Izumi tuned and finally got a good look, and her eyes widened in fear. She took a step back at the ninja. It's a shame he has a strong lighting release, the voice said again. Why are you here? Izumi finally said, and the holder of the voice raised an eyebrow and gave a little chuckle. I was here to serve Gato and get my money, but it seems like he is dead. The voice said, I've been hiding far too long. It's time to come out, she said, and gave Izumi a small smile. You two are very young, but seem very strong for your age. Izumi gave a hesitant nod and got ready to fight as Satoru finally got up and made his way over to Izumi. Izumi, what the hell hap? He started but stopped as he recognized the person in front of him. He went from shock to excitement, and lighting darted to surge around his body. Amayuri Ringo, with Yamato. Yamato ran down hall after hall trying to find any trace of Zabuza. A few thugs got in his way, but they were no match for his skills. He finally made it to the end of the corridor and was about to stop, but his danger sense kicked in and he ducked as a giant sword flew over his head. The sword impaled the wall and a tall figure stood on top. You. I can't say that I know who you are, the figure said, and Yamato looked up and met his target. Zabuza Momochi, a rank missing from Kiri, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen, Yamato said, and Zabuza smiled behind his bandages. It seems you know me, but I don't know you, Zabuza said, and cloned down and grabbed his fabled Kubikiribocho. I guess it doesn't matter, you'll die anyway, Zabuza said, and rushed Yamato with high Junin speeds. Yamato dodged the first strikes until he finally managed to break away. Wood style, pillar emergence. Yamato yelled, making Zabuza go wide-eyed as giant pillars of wood came towards him at high Chunin speed. He dodged them all and looked at Yamato with a mix of shock and excitement. My name is Yamato, Junin of Konohagakure no Sato, holder of the fabled wood release. With Naruto. Naruto gave a frustrated grunt as another Senbon struck his shoulder. He sent a few shards at the mirrors, but it had no effect. He used the only fire jutsu he knew, but it didn't do anything to the mirrors. He made some seals and created a few clones and sent them out. The clones didn't go anywhere as Senbon struck the clones almost instantly and they popped. Naruto's eyes grew wide for a second, but Haku didn't notice. He shut his eyes and channeled his crystal-natured chakra into his feet and let it slowly seep into the ground. Haku felt a little uneasy at Naruto's stillness, so she sent a few more Senbon. She cried out though as she felt a hand wound around her neck. She looked down and saw that Naruto had his hand around her neck. She looked to his original spot he was at, and saw him there, a clone. She thought and she looked around and saw that there were a few dozens clones for each mirror. Her eyes portrayed shock and the real Naruto opened his eyes. Haku was about to speak until Naruto cut her off. Your Senbon really hurt. Naruto said while pulling the Senbon out of his skin. You're probably wondering how I caught you. He said and he looked over at her. Yes. He asked and she tried to nod but couldn't. Let me go, I'll kill you. She choked out but the clone tightened her grip on her neck causing her to gasp. Well, thank you for asking. I started releasing my crystal chakra into the floor until it erupted from the surface creating clones. He gave a small smirk. Clever isn't it? He said and Haku looked in awe at the genius move. Naruto popped his clones and Haku fell from her spot and landed on the floor. Naruto smiled a dark smile and made his way over to Haku. Haku's eyes turned from awe to anger and she stood up and started doing hand signs. Ice spears, extreme frostbite. She said, sending 5 ice spears flying at Naruto, but using his speed he dodged them until one hit the ground in front of him and ice started spreading out and covering the floor. Extreme frostbite, if it touches you it will freeze your limbs for good, Haku said proudly and Naruto gave a look of satisfaction. I see. Naruto channeled chakra into his feet and stomped the ground and a big pink crystal came and destroyed the piece of earth and the ice went away. Crystal release still seems like it's better than ice. He said and looked at Haku and smiled darkly. I want you to show me how good your ice release is. Haku scowled and went and decided a different approach. She ran at Naruto and they entered in a taijutsu battle. She punched left, right, to the stomach but Naruto blocked all of them. She started picking up the pace and Naruto actually started struggling. Taijutsu had always been his weakness. One problem was she was fast, really fast. Naruto jumped away and wiped the blood from his mouth, and smiled. This is a better fight. He said and formed a few seals. Ruby Art. Dragon Storm. 15 small dragons formed and raced to Haku with Junin speeds. Haku only managed to dodge 13 as the last 2 hit Haku directly and she gave a yelp and hit the ground. Naruto scowled and went over to Haku, picked her up by her hair and looked at her. Haku's face went from pain to fear. Try harder. He threw her and she gave off another yelp. Haku laid on the floor bloody and beaten. She thought about Zabuza-sama and how her life been. She needed to help Zabuza-sama. Haku slowly got up with chakra swirling around her and ice shards around her. She looked over at Naruto and a thin layer of ice armor spread across her body. Naruto raised an eyebrow but kept silent but got in a ready position. Haku looked up, all other emotions gone, only pure anger remained. I'll kill you, she said darkly. Ice style. Zero emergence. Ice style. Zero emergence. Haku shot forward, charging at Naruto. It was so fast he barely had any time to dodge. He was hit by a fist and got sent back. He looked up and saw Haku with her body encased in what seemed like armor. It seems durable. Her speed has also increased tenfold. He looked at her and saw her face was blank of any emotion. Naruto gave a half smile. She wasn't holding back anymore. He stood up and Haku rushed him again. He dodged the first few punches, but was again sent flying. He scowled and went through hand seals. Emerald style. Dragon speed. He yelled and a bright green skinny dragon shot off and chased Haku. Haku tried running away, but it proved futile as it finally hit her. She stood up and her face still showed no emotion. More ice spread around her body and shot off at Naruto with high Junin speeds. Naruto channeled chakra to his feet and ran at Haku. He formed a one-handed sai and a blade of pink crystal formed on his arm. He slashed at Haku. She managed to dodge and sent a spinning kick to Naruto, which he dodged. He jumped back and she did the same. Naruto closed his eyes and started recovering a little strength. You're strong. He opened his eyes and looked at Haku. This is the hardest battle I've ever had. He started walking towards Haku and chakra started to circle around Naruto. But I need to win, he said, and a giant light green dragon formed behind him. He looked at Haku once again and answered her unanswered question. During this fight I've been slowly seeping my chakra into the ground and storing it, he said, and Haku gave a scowl and rushed at him. Naruto gave a dark smile. Someone's impatient. Emerald art. Dragon Rush. The giant emerald dragon launched at Haku and she was caught off guard by the speed of the jutsu, so it smashed into her. She was slammed against the wall, her ice armor shattering into pieces. She heard footsteps and she looked up and saw Naruto hovering above her. She tried to stand up but Naruto kicks her and she falls over. She gives a scowl. "Damn it, I'll kill you," she screamed, and Naruto gave an amused smile. "You're going to kill me? And that's why you're on the floor and I'm not?" he questioned, and Haku gave another scowl and used the last of her chakra to form an ice Senbon and send it flying at Naruto. He gave another amused smile and intercepted it with one of his own. "Well, I'm proud to say I am happy with the fight," he started off. "You are indeed strong. And with your ice release you're even stronger." He gave a small chuckle. "I wanted to ask you something," he said, and Haku had no choice but to listen. "Why do you work for someone like Zabuza?" Haku was caught off guard by the question, but answered it. "Zabuza-sama gave me a purpose. He saved my life and I will happily do anything for him," she said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like you would do anything for this man," he said, and Haku gave a small smile. "Yes, I'm a tool for Zabuza-sama to use at any moment in time." Naruto narrowed his eyes at the word, tool. He never liked how shinobi could use others as tools. He hated it. "Sounds like bullshit to me," he said, and Haku widened her eyes. "What? If Zabuza means that much to you, then you're not a tool. You're just his bitch. And I would bet he probably cares nothing for you," he finished, and Haku's eyes flashed dangerously. "How dare you speak badly about Zabuza-sama?" Naruto looked around and looked to be in thought. "I've always thought you should be generous to those you care about. From the first time you meet, till the last time, people you love and care about could change you in ways you don't even understand. And if people who you thought loved you didn't, then forget about them. I have a story, and I'm sure you have a story. Protect those close to you no matter the cost. Never give anyone second chances. If they loved you they would be there, not elsewhere," he finished, and Haku looked on in surprise. She didn't think this kid could be like this. She started thinking about what he said. Did Zabuza care? Is life worth living if you have no purpose? Why stay with someone who doesn't want you? He questioned, and he heard a faint sob, and he looked back at Haku and saw her sobbing. "Then what do I do?" she questioned, and Naruto looked at her in slight pity. He sighed and sat down cross-legged, and Haku looked up at him. "Tell me your story." With Satoru, Ringo looked at the boy with slight interest. She could feel his chakra and the powerful lightning release. She raised an eyebrow and took out her fabled Kiba blades. "Interesting. I thought that last attack would have taken you out," she said, and she only received a grin from him. Satoru looked over at Izumi. "Izumi, I want you to go help Yamato-sensei. This is my fight," he said, and Izumi looked at him in shock. "Satoru, I'm not leaving you," she said, and she received a glare from him. "Izumi, I can handle this." She saw his look and nodded slowly and made her way to find her sensei. "Please keep safe, Satoru, Naruto ni." Satoru looked back at Ringo with a serious expression. He shut his eyes and calmed down his wild chakra. Ringo looked on with a raised eyebrow at the display of emotions. This boy seems like he knows when he sees a powerful opponent. She thought and smiled internally, but kept up her emotionless facade. "You seem to have a powerful lighting affinity," she said, and she had to fight back a smirk from forming. Satoru eyed Ringo with examining gaze. "Okay Satoru, this is Amayuri Ringo we're talking about. One of the 7 ninja swordsmen, holder of the Kiba blades, and has an amazing lighting affinity. Her affinity was strong in the first place, but boosted up with those blades, it's insane." He thought, and a boost of adrenaline hit him. "This is Amayuri Ringo, 7 ninja swordsmen," he said again, and a giant smile formed on his face, and he rushed at her. Ringo faltered slightly at his speed but managed to dodge the sudden hit. "Interesting, at least he doesn't waste time," she thought. This time the smirk found its way onto her face. Satoru went through hand seals. Lighting style. Static impulse. He yelled, and around his hands an aura of static electricity formed and started sending small shock waves out from his hands. Ringo, having never seen this jutsu before, didn't know what it could do, so she just decided to observe it at first. She dodged the first few punches he aimed at her until they suddenly stopped. She looked around and couldn't find her enemy anywhere. She let out a groan and scanned the area around her. "I thought he would be better than this so far," she thought, but she was cut off from her thoughts as she spotted a lightning bolt flying towards her. She widened her eyes at the unexpected attack. She dodged to the side, and she felt a spike of chakra behind her. She turned around but was met with a kick to the face. She was sent tumbling back and skidded against the ground. She gave off a groan. Kid kicks hard as. She muttered and she looked up and saw her enemy. He was standing a few feet away with a serious look on his face, and lighting forming on his hand. Despite herself, she felt a blush creep up on her face as she eyed Satoru. What can she say? She likes strong guys. Of course she wasn't going all out yet. She stood up and took out her kiba blades. Satoru eyes the blades with a mixture of fear and awe. But he kept up his tough front. You did well, she said, and Satoru faltered slightly but kept staring at her. Ringo gave a sly smirk, and pointed a kiba blade at him. Maybe we will see each other another day, she said. Her sentence threw Satoru off guard. Wait, that was all he could get out before Ringo sunshined away in swirl of blue lighting. Satoru stood frozen at the spot his enemy was. His gaze slowly turned into a glare. Damn it all. With Yamato. Wood style. 4 pillars. 4 gaunt pillars arose from the ground and shot off towards the sword-wielding shinobi. Said shinobi managed to cut through the wood at an amazing pace. Yamato eyed his enemy. You really are as strong as they say, Zabuza Momochi, he said, and the dubbed Zabuza gave a smirk from behind his mask. You're not bad yourself, but you're genin? He asked, and Yamato halted and his face turned deadly serious. I have complete faith in my students, Yamato said, and Zabuza gave another smirk, but it went unseen under his mask. Zabuza flew through hand seals, water style, water dragon jutsu. He yelled and a huge water dragon launched itself at Yamato. Before Yamato could react, the giant dragon slowed down and started becoming a light white until it cracked and broke. I have great timing, don't I, Yamato-sensei? Yamato and Zabuza both went wide-eyed, then turned around and saw Izumi standing there. Yamato had a look of happiness, however Zabuza's only held annoyance. Before anything could happen, lightning hit the ground next to Zabuza and Amayuri. Ringo stood there. Ignoring the surprised looks, she looked over at Zabuza. Zabuza, it's time to leave, she said, and Zabuza glared at her, but before he could talk she forcefully shut his mouth. We're leaving, she said, and Izumi widened her eyes. Wait, she yelled, and Ringo looked at her. What happened to Satoru? She asked, fearing the worst. And when Ringo started chuckling, she was getting more scared. Don't worry about your friend, he's fine. And like before, she was gone with Zabuza. When Izumi and Yamato heard he was okay, they let out a sigh of relief. Yamato's eyes went wide and looked over at Izumi in worry. Naruto.